Hey everyone, my name is Lieutenant Nick, and today I'll be talking about the board game Brook City, published by Blacklist Games in 2019. This game was designed by the Sadler brothers, Brady and Adam, and is for 1 to 4 players. It's a fully cooperative game and plays from about 45 minutes to 2 hours. In this game, each player is a police officer who is a member of the Brook City Police Department. And Brook City seems to be a fictitious city, very reminiscent of some sort of West Coast city, such as Los Angeles, perhaps. And the game definitely pulls from the 80s cop drama theme, and maybe even specifically I would say the Lethal Weapon movies. So if you're into that kind of genre of television and movie, then this game definitely might interest you. In this game, you and then your various colleagues on the police department are working to eliminate crime throughout Brook City while also trying to solve a specific case that's chosen at the beginning of the game. Now, this game uses the Sadler brothers' patented modular deck system, or MDS, which they've implemented in at least one game before Brook City and also have used in several designs since Brook City was published. In a modular deck system game, there's various decks that you're playing with throughout the game that can be changed with each playthrough. So, for example, in Brook City, there's 3 decks that allow for variability. The first is a character deck. The character deck is the deck that's used by the actual player. So in Brook City, I think there's 8 different characters each player can choose from. And when you pick your player, you have then that player's or officer's deck to play with. Then there is a criminal deck. The criminal deck includes various suspects that you'll be encountering throughout Brook City and who are trying to essentially impede your progress of solving the case. And the criminal deck also includes besides specific suspects, also just general henchmen or criminals that also are going to try to make your life more difficult. And then finally, there's the case deck. And the case deck is essentially your winning condition for the game. To win, you need to solve whatever specific case you're playing with, and those rules are dictated by the case cards themselves. And then there's also other cards in that case deck that will make your task more challenging too. So which each of these types of decks, the game comes with various options to play with. So for the character deck, like I said, there's 8 different characters to play with. With the case deck, there's 3 different cases. And with the criminal deck, there's 3 different criminals decks to play with. So you can do the math yourself and figure out the number of unique types of playthroughs you could have with this game. And I'll talk more on that at the end of the video, but just wanted to bring this up now so you kind of understand the background of the design for this game. So with that said, first I'll give you an overview of how this game plays, and then I will conclude with my final thoughts. So here I have a game of Brook City that I've been playing with my girlfriend that's now a few rounds in. I would say we're maybe halfway through the game. So this gives you an idea of what the game state looks like when you're about halfway through a playthrough of Brook City. This is, of course, the bird's eye view map of Brook City itself. Throughout the map, there's these various named locations, including the Brook City Police Department office, where you and your colleagues will start the game. And then these other locations you may or may not be traveling to, depending on where crimes are popping up throughout the city, where your clues are located for the case that you're trying to solve, and then where the lead token is located. With that said, I will touch on the setup of the game. It's actually quite simple. Each player would put their character token in one of the spaces of the Brook City Police Department office, and then each character each player will also choose a colored cruiser car. So in this case, we have Moira in the green police cruiser and Wilson in the blue police cruiser, and along with the miniature for the cruiser, you also get then the corresponding vehicle card. I'll give more details on how vehicles work in a second, or in a few minutes, but These vehicle cards give back some description on the abilities of the card. And when your character is in a vehicle, you put your player miniature actually on the vehicle card to represent that they're currently driving the vehicle around Brook City. So with that said, I want to go through the various decks that come with the base game of Brook City. To start, we have the character decks. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, you have 7 or 8 characters to choose from. Once you choose your character at the beginning of the game, you will then take all of their corresponding character cards. Within a character deck, there's 3 types of cards. There's encounter cards. That's how you, these are cards that allow you to combat the various criminals and suspects throughout the city. Essentially, each encounter card will have a symbol that represents the method that you're encountering the criminal with. So a police hat represents a normal encounter. Then there's a handgun, which represents a reckless encounter. And then there's a walkie-talkie symbol that represents a cautious encounter. So thematically, you can imagine that a cautious encounter might be the officer standing outside a bank where there's a criminal inside trying to talk them to come out so they can peacefully arrest them, whereas maybe a reckless encounter would be the officer breaking through the window of the bank with their gun in hand, shooting at the criminal until the criminal either gets shot or eventually surrenders. But mechanically speaking, these matter because the crimes themselves will have various resistances for each of the types of encounters. So the number represents the number you have to subtract from your success roll. So in the case for this retail pressure crime card, the criminal actually has 0 resistance to a reckless encounter, but 1 resistance to both the normal and cautious encounters. So that just adds a little variety to the gameplay in terms of how you're actually taking out these criminals. And each character then is going to have a deck that's built around probably the various types of encounters. So for Wilson, I would say more of his cards relate to the normal type of encounter icon. So in addition to the encounter card, you then have tactic cards. Tactic cards are cards that once you play them, they actually go into your play area and stay there permanently for the remainder of the game and essentially give you a one-time buff or a passive buff that you can take advantage of throughout the rest of the game. So in the case of this Know Your Enemy tactic card, from now on, every time I'm doing a normal encounter, police hat encounter, I'm gaining +1 die to my die roll, which is really helpful. So that's what the tactic cards are. And then finally, you have the ability cards. An ability card is just a card you play. You have a one-time effect that's explained on the card itself, and then it gets discarded. The base game comes with 3 different criminal decks, and essentially it's the main suspect that you'll be who's going to be interfering with your efforts to solve a case. So in this case, we're playing with the Slade Harper criminal deck. Each criminal deck will come with kind of a setup card that explains maybe where the suspect for that criminal deck will go, and then maybe some sort of activation ability that you will have to play with, and then the suspect card themselves. So Slade Harper is the suspect then for the Slade Harper criminal deck, and he is represented by a actual miniature on the board, and he loves to hang out at the Nightscape Theater, so that's where his token begins the game at. And then there's other, in addition then to the setup and suspect cards, there's various other crime cards that essentially are the henchmen for that criminal that appear on the board and can be encountered with the various character players. And then there's also these event cards, which are similar to a character ability card where they basically get played, some sort of negative consequence will occur, and then it gets discarded. And then we have the case deck. And the case deck is basically what you're trying to solve to win the game. And with the case deck, you'll have a setup card that explains how to set the case up. So in this case, it's telling us to remove all the various case cards from the deck, which I've already done, and then place the various clue tokens on the board. So each of these colored circle tokens represent clues that we need to collect in order to solve the case. And then on the case card, it explains the winning condition, which basically says if the cops control all 5 clue tokens, the cops win. Additionally, this organizer was one that I already purchased, didn't come with the game, but all the components here come with the base game. So there's miniatures, like I said, for all the vehicles. There's miniatures for the various criminals. There's miniatures for each character, miniatures for each of the suspects. And then there's 4 different colored cruiser cars, depending on how many players you're playing with. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, you could play from 1 to 4 characters. Then these are called progress tokens. Essentially for each criminal card or suspect card, there's a number in the upper left, which is the number of progress tokens you need to have accumulated on that specific card in order to bust them. And then there's the dice themselves. There's a few different symbols. There's the success symbol. There's this hunch symbol, like I just said, that can give you, allow you to turn into a success if you have a hunch token to spend, or you can just collect a new hunch token using that symbol. And then there's the crit symbol, which is the exploding dice symbol. So it counts as a hit and then also allows you to do a re-roll. So now I'll quick do a single turn of Brook City to give you a better idea of what that looks like. At the start of each round, the players can decide which player will take their turn first, or their cop turn first. And then you simply can follow these reference cards step by step to determine what exactly you do. So the first part of a cop turn, so a round is comprised of a cop turn, a criminal turn, and a case turn. Each player will take their cop turn fully, and then once every player has taken their cop turn, then you go on to the criminal turn and finally the case turn. So in this case, we'll say Wilson Fox is going to do his cop turn first, and the first part of the cop turn is the dispatch phase, which first says to refresh cards in the cop play area. And right now, my cop play area are essentially the cards to the right of my character deck, and the cards over here are the discard pile. And both cards are straight, so none need to be refreshed. And then I draw 1 criminal card. So over here again was the criminal deck. So I take the top card from the criminal deck and see what it is. And since it's a crime card, that means I need to place a new criminal on the board. And it tells me the location is P29. So what's nice about this board, if you haven't already noticed, it's a simple hex system where each square or space of the board is given a specific coordinate. So P29 would be way over here. And it also even gives you the location as well as South Glen Docks. So then for the case of that, for a crime card, it would then go into my character's crime area. My colleague over here, Maura, has her own crime area as well. But since I drew this crime card during my crime turn, it goes in my crime area. And that means it's not necessarily only my responsibility to deal with that crime card. My partner can help me as well, but it is in my crime area, and it will have an activation ability that I'll have to take care of later in my cop turn. So that concludes the dispatch phase. We then have the act phase. And during the act phase, like the card says, perform each of the following steps in any order of your choosing. Right now, I'm the blue cruiser car located here. I'm right by the main suspect, Slade. So why not then just start with an action step? And an action step, it says perform one of the following. move action, card action, a hunch action, or an interact action. And I'm going to use this card to do the card action, which essentially means if I have a card in my play area that has a action listed on it, I can then go ahead and do that action. So I'll go ahead and do the action specified on my starting player card, which is a normal encounter that gives me, allows me to roll 2 dice, and then I can place 1 progress on a crime in my crime area. I'll go and encounter Slade, who is right next to me. You can only encounter things that are essentially next to your character piece, whether it's your miniature or your vehicle. And in order for me to encounter Slade, I first of all look at his resistance against a normal encounter, which is 1. So that means whatever number successes I roll, I will have to subtract 1 from that total. And, also, in order for me to successfully bust him, I need to achieve a total of 6 progress. And that's because the P stands for number of players, and that's multiplied by the first number. So since this is a 2-player game, it's 3 times 2. So 6 total progress points are needed to bust Slade. So I take 2 dice, but I also get to take into account my tactic card that's already in my play area that says during each of your normal encounters gain +1 dice. So that means now I have a 3rd dice I get to roll. So I'll go ahead, hope for some good luck here. And I rolled 2 successes and the hunch symbol. So this means I could spend one of my hunches to turn any one of these 3 hunch symbols into a success. So I'll just go ahead and do that and then have to discard my 1 hunch symbol. And now I have a total of 3 successes. So just to, in case you guys already forgot, the resistance of Slade was 1 for a normal encounter. So 3 successes minus 1 means 2 total progress points. So I go ahead and take 2 progress tokens, and I place them on Slade. And that would conclude my, let me get the reference card here. That concludes the action step of my turn. But one other thing to keep in mind was the other part of this card that says, then you may place 1 progress on a crime in your crime area. So I'm just going to go ahead and add another progress token to this crime that's in my crime area. Since it already had 1 on it, now it just needs 1 more in order to meet the 3 required to bust that criminal. And finally, I can move. And, now I see there's kind of a lot of crime going on down in that southeast corner. And with a vehicle, you can move you can move up to 3 streets. You can move 3 streets. So a street is a quadrant of 4 spaces, whereas a figure, let's say I was just my figure, you can only move 3 spaces. So if, let's say, my figure was here, I could go only 1, 2, 3. But since I'm in my cruiser, I actually get to move 3 streets. And that allows me to go 1, 2, 3. But when we look at the cruiser card, one of its abilities says I can exhaust this, which basically means turn it 90 degrees. While driving this vehicle, you may move 1 for each crime in your crime area. And since I have currently 2 crime cards in my crime area, that allows me to do 2 more street movements, which takes me 1, 2. And unfortunately, I'm still too far to do anything to those criminals, but that would conclude my move step. And then I have my card step, which would give me the opportunity to play any card I currently have in my hand. And I have 3 encounter cards, which unfortunately I can't take advantage of since I'm not within or 4 encounter cards, I should say. And unfortunately, I'm not within space close enough to encounter any of the crime down there. So instead of playing a card, I'll just go ahead and draw a card from my my deck. And I drew an ability card which says each cop may either draw a lead or gain 1 hunch. But my turn's now over, so unfortunately can't take advantage of that card this turn. So now that I'm done with the act phase, we move on to the crime phase, which says activate each card in your crime area left to right by resolving its activate ability. We have 4 cards now in my crime area. These first 2 came from the case deck. So as mentioned in the activate area, it's either discard 1 hunch or suffer 1 stress. So I'll just go ahead and take 1 more stress. My total that I can take is 12. I currently have taken 4. Oh, oops, that's progress. Since my total is 12 and I've already taken 4, I feel that I can, Wilson's capable of taking another stress. Then the next card in my crime area says remove 1 progress from a clue, which is not ideal, but currently don't have any progress on clues to even remove. So don't have to worry about actually doing anything with that particular card at the moment. Then we have this criminal card, which states, and I'm sorry that the bottom's kind of cut off here, but it says either place 1 influence on this card or suffer 1 stress. Since no influence is currently on that card, I'm just going to go ahead and put the influence token there. And then this card also says either place 1 influence on this card or discard 1 card you control. I don't really want to discard a card I control, so I'll go ahead and place in influence on this card as well. And then that's all the criminal cards in my play area. So that, or activate, each card in my crime area. Then I draw, so draw 1 card and flip this card. So I go ahead and draw another card from my player deck. And then it mentions to flip this card because this is also a turn tracker. So it allows each player, helps each player keep track of who's already taken their turn. So now that I flip this over, I know that I've already taken my turn, but Mora over here still has her card on her urgent side. So she gets to now take her turn. We'll say that she took her turn for the sake of time, and now we move on to the next 2 steps, the final 2 steps of a round, starting with the criminal turn, where each card in the crime area now activates left to right. You just go through each activate ability of the crime cards over there and pretty much do what they say, which usually is simply adding influence to a card or taking stress tokens or using up punch tokens. And then after the criminal turn, we move on to the case turn, which is very similar to the criminal turn in that you activate the cards over there from left to right by resolving activate abilities, which actually right now there aren't any case cards that have an activate ability anyway. Then you draw a case card from the case deck and do whatever it says. So in this case, the card I drew says search the case deck and case discard pile for 1 copy of witness account and attach it to a crime in play. So I would go ahead and do what that event card just told me to do, which was the draw phase of the case turn. And then we have the end phase where each cop flips their turn card to its cop turn side. So now I would take this card, flip it back over, put it back down, and Mora would do the same. And we move on to the next round of play. One of the losing conditions occur. In this game, it would be whatever the criminal operation card says here. If ever this had 4 influence on it, we lose. Or one of our officers has reached their maximum in stress, or we draw all the cards from the case deck. And before solving the case, we lose. And then, of course, the winning condition was satisfying the requirements on the case card described here. So that gives you an idea of how the game plays. And now I'll go over my thoughts on this game. So I first want to start off by saying I actually had the privilege of meeting both the Sadler brothers at the Grand Con board game convention in Grand Rapids, Michigan a few years ago. And during that convention, I was able to get their autographs as well as Eric from the Dice Tower and Ignacy Chevicek from Portal Games. But the Sadler brothers were demoing their game Street Masters, which also uses the same modular deck system mechanic that this game uses. And they're very nice guys. Also great game designers. I think the board game industry in general would agree that they're talented game designers. They've now designed several games already that I think that do sell fairly well, and I'm sure they'll continue to sell games in the future that are successful. So I wish them the best of luck. Furthermore, I want to point out that I was an original Kickstarter backer for this game. And not only did I get the base game, which is what I was showing off today in this video, I also backed a lot of their expansion content. So I'm saying all this because I want it to be known I have every reason to really enjoy this game. But the brutal honest truth is my girlfriend and I only made it, let's say, halfway through the game before I think we've decided to stop playing. Now with my girlfriend, it's hard for her to find a game she really enjoys playing in general. She's not as big of a board game fan as I am. But for me, the main reason that I guess I kind of lost interest was it just wasn't the game that I was hoping it would be. And that's my own fault. I could have done more research ahead of time before even backing the game in the first place on Kickstarter. But I guess I just, have board game acquisition disorder, saw a police game that looked cool and went ahead and backed it without maybe researching it more. Before going into more detail on that, I will touch on the strength of this game. And first and foremost, it's not a bad game by any means. There are objectively bad games out there. This is not one of them. It is a well-designed game. And so I want to make that clear. And I would say one of its biggest strengths is the theme. It does a great job of paying homage to those 80s police classic shows and Lethal Weapon movies. I think a lot of players are going to be able to connect with the various characters that you can play with in this game. Like I said, if you want to play Will Smith, you have that option. You have Mel Gibson, essentially, from Lethal Weapon. But even the criminals are, I think, kind of have unique personas, and especially the fact that they have Guy Fieri in this game. So in the game, in Brook City, apparently he's known as Gus Ferguson, but I mean, it's Guy Fieri, and he's even got the flames on his shirt, and his operation card says Flavor Town on it. So it's clearly a Guy Fieri doppelganger. I don't know the background of that at all. I'm sure the Sadler brothers have some reason for including him in the game. Maybe they know him in person, or maybe they just always wanted to go after Guy Fieri and they have a deep hatred for him. With that said, Guy Fieri, if you're watching this video, you should still get this game because you're in it, and I think you'd enjoy playing a game that includes basically yourself in the game. But regardless, the point I'm trying to make is there's a lot of theme that went into this game, and I think that has a lot of value in itself. And additionally, the modular deck system does allow for a lot of replayability, even with just the base game. Because you have the 3 criminal decks to play with, the 3 case decks to play with, and then the 7 or 8 characters. Yeah, at least 8. It is definitely 8 characters to play with. And then when it comes to the characters, you can play a 1-player game, you can play a 4-player game, you can play a 2 or 3-player game and play with a different number of characters, and therefore your experience with just your gameplay experience by just varying the number of players is going to, of course, change. So there's a lot of replayability in the base game, and that also should be mentioned. Now, another thing to note is this game, I would say, is very similar to the Sentinels of the Multiverse games. If you've ever played those, this is very similar in that each character or player has their own unique deck of cards. Some of these cards are going to, when you play them, they stay out on the table, which are the tactic cards, as I mentioned in the overview of the game. And that's similar to Sentinels of the Multiverse. And then you have, the environment cards. You have the I don't know the multiverse terms, but You know, you have the environment cards, I think, in that game, which are similar to kind of the case cards maybe in this game. And then, of course, you have the main villain you're facing in the multiverse games who has their own deck of cards, which is similar then to the criminal deck in this game. And I think the Sadler brothers would admit that they did, that game definitely inspired their modular deck system games. But the big difference, of course, is this has a playing board that you're moving pieces around on. So if you're a fan of that game and just would love a retheme of multiverse with a police theme from the 80s, then this game would definitely be something you'd probably be interested in. Now, going back to my thoughts on it not being the game I wanted to be, I think that really boils down to when you're actually encountering the various criminals throughout the city. The fact that these encounters water down to just you rolling successes and then subtracting a resistance value isn't enough to keep me engaged with the game. And in my mind, I was hoping for a combat system of sorts that was maybe reminiscent of a Zombicide, where you have your various weapons you could choose from. So I could see maybe you have your shotgun in this game, like you have your police issued handgun, you have your shotgun, you have your M14 rifle or whatever type of big guns they were using in the cops were using in the 80s, maybe a rocket launcher. You have your equipment like flashbang grenades or smoke grenades and your bulletproof vest equipment and all that type of itemization. I think would be cool to have in a game like this, a police themed game like this. And then you're rolling dice to see how many hits you're doing, and maybe then the criminals have a defense value, but the criminals also have their own combat or weapons and whatnot that they're rolling against you. And like I said, then basically you're getting a police themed Zombicide game, I guess is what I'm kind of imagining. And then there's, cover terrain and, just a completely different game. And I know that's not what the Sadler brothers set out to do with Brook City. So like I said, it's my own fault then for maybe getting the game to begin with. And it's not necessarily that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the game. It's just not what I was maybe envisioning. And like an example too, is that one of the characters is essentially like a sniper character. Their image is, let me just show you. They have, Selena Gomez. She has a sniper, and in the game, that's kind of represented by the fact she's able to encounter criminals from a distance. Instead of having to be adjacent to a criminal in order to roll dice to encounter them, she can be 5 spaces away or whatever because she has a sniper rifle. Well, I'd rather be able to look at, a card that shows the sniper rifle. It has, a set number of attack value points, and I'm rolling to get hits with my sniper rifle, and I can use a scope if I want, or, I wish the combat, I wish there was maybe a combat system included in this game instead of just an encounter system. I don't want to belabor the point. All I'm trying to say is then because of that, I just couldn't stay interested in this game because the way that I was encountering these criminals wasn't what I was hoping it would be. So with that said, it's definitely still a solid game. It's just not a game for me. And for that reason, I'm going to sadly have to retire from the Brook City Police Department. But I really wish them the best of luck. And with that said, still feel free to look into this game in more detail. Watch maybe a full gameplay video of this game online before deciding if it's something you want or not, don't want. Like I said, a lot of expansion content for this game exists too. So I only was probably scratching the surface when it comes to the content to play with in this game. But I'm just confident enough that if I were to even play with all this expansion stuff, my view of the game probably really wouldn't change. Do your due diligence, look more into this game than simply taking my words. And with that said, I want to thank you guys for watching and hope to see you guys again soon.